The galaxy had known peace for 10,000 years. 47 different species had come together under the banner of the Galactic Coalition. They traded goods across the stars. They shared knowledge and technology. They built great cities on distant worlds and watched their children grow up without knowing the meaning of war. It was a golden age that seemed like it would last forever. Then the Vraxen came and everything changed. Nobody knew where they came from. Some said they crawled out of the dark spaces between galaxies where no light had ever reached. Others believed they were a punishment from the universe itself. But everyone agreed on one thing. The Vraxen were death incarnate. Their ships were not made of metal like normal vessels. They were alive. Massive creatures of flesh and bone had been twisted and shaped into weapons of war. Their hulls pulsed with a sickly green light, and their weapons fired beams of pure hatred that could melt through the strongest armor. They moved through space like a swarm of locusts, and they left nothing but ash in their wake. Admiral Xyloth stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the end of everything he had ever known. He was a Valthorian, a tall being with blue skin and 4 arms. He had served the Coalition for 200 years and had never lost a battle. But today would be different. Today he would lose everything. The Battle of Meridian Prime was supposed to be a decisive victory. The Coalition had gathered 3,000 of their finest warships. They had the best crews and the most advanced weapons. They were confident that they could stop the Vraxen advance and push them back into the darkness from which they came. They were wrong. The Vraxen swarm numbered in the millions. For every ship the Coalition destroyed, 100 more took its place. They did not fear death. They did not retreat. They simply kept coming with a hunger that could not be satisfied. Xyloth watched as the cruiser Eternal Hope exploded in a ball of fire. 3,000 souls gone in an instant. Next to it, the battleship Iron Will was torn apart by Vraxen tendrils, its crew screaming into the void as the alien creatures poured through the hull. One by one, the greatest fleet the galaxy had ever assembled was being reduced to floating debris. The admiral gave the order to retreat, but he knew it was already too late. Less than 300 ships escaped that day. The rest were consumed by the swarm, their crews either killed outright or taken for purposes too horrible to imagine. In the weeks that followed, the Vraxen pushed deeper into Coalition space. World after world fell to their hunger. Ancient civilizations that had existed for millions of years were wiped out in days. The Veltrani, masters of music and art, were silenced forever. The Korathan, brilliant scientists who had unlocked the secrets of the universe, became nothing more than food for the swarm. The Tetherians, diplomats who had brokered peace between species for generations, watched helplessly as their homeworld burned. Commander Valara was one of the Tetherian survivors. She was a small being with silver skin and large dark eyes that had seen too much suffering. Before the war, she had been known for her gentle nature and her ability to find common ground between enemies. Now she spent her days helping refugees escape the advancing swarm, and her nights having nightmares about those she could not save. The survivors fled to the outer rim of the galaxy where the stars were few and hope was even fewer. They gathered on a frozen moon called Cathara 9. Billions of beings from dozens of species all crammed together in underground bunkers meant for a fraction of their number. Food was scarce, medicine was scarcer, and the Vraxen were coming. It was during one of the endless council meetings that someone mentioned the humans. The room fell silent at the word. Humans were something of a legend in the Coalition. They had been discovered 2 centuries ago. A young species that had just begun to explore the stars. The Coalition had welcomed them at first, but when the Korathi Empire had attacked Earth, the Coalition had chosen to stay neutral. They had abandoned humanity to face the Korathi alone. Against all odds, the humans had won. They had pushed back the Korathi invasion and established themselves as a force to be reckoned with. But they had never forgiven the Coalition for their betrayal. They had built something called the Veil, an impenetrable barrier around their space that no scanner could pierce and no ship could cross. They had withdrawn from galactic affairs completely and had not been heard from since. Admiral Xyloth dismissed the idea immediately. The humans wanted nothing to do with the Coalition. They had made that very clear. Reaching out to them would be pointless at best and dangerous at worst. What if the humans had allied with the Vraxen? What if they were waiting for the coalition to weaken before striking the final blow themselves? But Commander Valara saw things differently. She had studied the humans before their withdrawal. She knew their history, their culture, their values. They were not a cruel species. They were wounded and angry, yes, but not evil. And they had shown a remarkable ability to fight against impossible odds. She argued her case before the council for hours. She spoke of desperation and hope. She spoke of redemption and second chances. She spoke of a universe where even old enemies could become new friends in the face of a greater threat. In the end, the council agreed to try. They had nothing left to lose. A single message was transmitted toward the Veil. It was simple and direct. It explained the situation, the threat, the desperation. It did not make excuses for the past. It did not demand help. It simply asked. The message ended with a single sentence that Commander Valara had written herself. "We know we do not deserve your help, but we are asking anyway because you are our only hope." Then they waited. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. The Vraxen drew closer with each passing day. Their scouts had been spotted at the edge of the system. The final battle was approaching, and from the humans, there was only silence. 3 months had passed since the message was sent, and the humans had not replied. Most of the coalition survivors had given up hope. They believed the humans had either ignored their plea or had never received it at all. Perhaps the Veil blocked incoming transmissions just as effectively as it blocked everything else. Perhaps humanity had simply chosen to let the galaxy burn. Admiral Xyloth stood before a holographic map of the system and tried to plan for a battle he knew he could not win. His fleet had been reduced to 92 vessels. Some were proper warships, but most were converted freighters and mining ships that had been armed with whatever weapons could be found. Against the full might of the Vraxen swarm, they would last perhaps an hour. The intelligence reports were grim. The Vraxen Hive Mother had been detected approaching the system. It was a creature beyond imagination, a living moon that served as the brain of the entire swarm. Where it went, billions of Vraxen followed. It had personally overseen the destruction of a dozen homeworlds, and now it was coming for Cathara 9. Commander Valara refused to give up hope. Every day she checked the communication arrays for any sign of a response. Every day she was disappointed, but she kept checking because the alternative was to accept that everyone she had ever known was about to die. Far away, beyond the Veil, the message had indeed been received. Captain Daniel Harris sat in his quarters aboard the USS Sentinel and read the words from Commander Valara for the 100th time. He was 43 years old, with gray appearing at his temples and lines on his face that spoke of sleepless nights and heavy burdens. He had joined the Navy at 18, right after the Korathi War had ended, and had spent his entire adult life preparing for a conflict that he hoped would never come. The Sentinel was his ship. She was 3 kilometers of black metal and advanced technology, the product of 2 centuries of human innovation. While the rest of the galaxy believed humanity had retreated into isolation to lick its wounds, the truth was far more interesting. Humanity had spent those 200 years learning, growing, and building. The Veil was not a prison. It was a cocoon, and the Sentinel was what had emerged from it. Lieutenant Commander Katie Morrison entered his quarters without knocking. She was his executive officer and his closest friend. A woman of 40 with red hair, and a no-nonsense attitude that had earned her the respect of every sailor on the ship. She had been with him since his first command, and he trusted her judgment more than his own. She sat down across from him and looked at the message on his screen. "The Council has been debating for 3 months," she said. "They need to make a decision." Harris nodded slowly. The situation was complicated. The Coalition had abandoned Earth when it needed them most. Millions had died because the great powers of the galaxy had chosen not to get involved. There were people on Earth who still remembered, who still carried the anger like a fire in their hearts. But there were also people who believed in something greater, who believed that holding onto old grudges was not the same as justice, who believed that allowing genocide to happen when you had the power to stop it was just as bad as committing it yourself. Admiral Patricia Webb was one of those people. She was the commander of Earth's Defense Council. A woman in her 70s who had fought in the Karathi War as a young officer. She had lost friends and family to the invasion. She had every reason to hate the coalition for their betrayal, but she had voted to help anyway. The decision came down to the wire. The council was split almost evenly. Some argued that Earth should remain hidden and let the galaxy destroy itself. Others argued that humanity had a moral obligation to act. In the end, Admiral Webb's vote had been the deciding one. "We will send help," she had said. "But we will be careful. One ship only. If this is a trap, we lose one ship. If it is genuine, one ship will be enough." Captain Harris had not questioned the decision. He had simply prepared his crew for war. The Sentinel was crewed by 500 of the finest men and women Earth had to offer. Chief Engineer Nathan Cole was a genius who understood the ship's quantum drive better than anyone alive. He was a big man with gentle hands who could coax miracles out of machines that had no business working. Lieutenant Christina Reyes was the navigation officer, a young woman with quick reflexes and an instinctive understanding of spatial geometry. Lieutenant Ryan Peters handled tactical operations with the calm efficiency of a surgeon. Weapons Officer Scott Palmer knew every system on the ship and could make them sing. Ensign Laura Mitchell managed operations and kept everything running smoothly. They were ready. Harris stood on the bridge and looked at the view screen. The veil shimmered before them like a curtain of starlight. Beyond it lay a galaxy in flames, billions of lives hanging by a thread. "All hands," he said over the intercom. "This is the captain. We are about to cross the veil for the first time in 200 years. Many of you have heard stories about what the coalition did to our ancestors. Some of you may question why we are going to help them now. I will not pretend to have all the answers, but I know this. There are innocent people dying out there. Children who never harmed anyone. Families who just want to live in peace. If we have the power to help them, and we choose not to, then we are no better than those who abandoned us." He paused and looked at his crew. They were afraid. He could see it in their eyes. But they were also determined. "Set course for Cathara 9, he ordered. "Maximum speed." The Sentinel's engines hummed with power as the ship moved toward the veil. For a moment, reality seemed to stretch and bend around them. Then there was a flash of light, and they were through. The galaxy opened up before them, vast and beautiful and dying. Nathan Cole looked up from his console. "The drive is stable, Captain. All systems operating normally." Katie Morrison checked the tactical display. "I am detecting massive energy signatures near Cathara 9. It looks like the battle has already begun." Harris nodded. "Then we had better hurry." The Sentinel accelerated into the darkness, a single ship against the end of everything. The sky above Cathara 9 had turned black with Vraxan ships. They filled the void like a living carpet, millions of organic vessels pulsing with hungry light. At their center floated the Hive Mother, a creature so vast that it bent space around itself with its sheer mass. It watched the battle unfold with a billion eyes and directed its children with thoughts that traveled faster than light. Admiral Xyloth stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched his fleet die. The coalition ships fought bravely, but it was not enough. It was never going to be enough. One by one, his vessels were being torn apart by the swarm. The cruiser Silver Dawn exploded to his left. The destroyer Night Storm was swarmed by thousands of smaller Vraxan fighters that ripped through its hull like parasites through flesh. The transport ship Hope of Tomorrow, carrying 10,000 refugees, was engulfed by a massive Vraxan tendril and crushed like an egg. Commander Valara clung to her console as her own ship shuddered under enemy fire. Half the crew was dead. The other half was fighting fires and trying to keep the engines from exploding. She had accepted that she was going to die. She only wished she could have done more. Then something impossible happened. Space itself tore open like a wound in reality. A ripple of energy spread across the battlefield, disrupting Vraxan targeting systems and causing coalition sensors to go haywire. From the center of the disturbance emerged a ship unlike anything anyone had ever seen. It was black. Not painted black, but truly black, as if it was made of darkness itself. Light seemed to fall into it and never come back out. It was angular and sharp, covered with geometries that hurt the eyes if you looked at them too long. Strange weapons bristled from every surface. devices that had no name in any coalition language. And it was alone. The Vraxan swarm turned to face the new arrival. 1,000,000 ships oriented themselves toward this single vessel that had dared to interrupt their feast. The Hive Mother pulsed with curiosity and hunger. It had consumed civilizations that spanned entire star systems. What was one more ship? On the bridge of the USS Sentinel, Captain Daniel Harris surveyed the battlefield with cold eyes. The situation was worse than he had expected. The Coalition fleet was nearly destroyed. The Vraxan swarm was larger than intelligence had suggested. And the Hive Mother was closer than he would have liked. But none of that mattered. He had a job to do. Lieutenant Ryan Peters called out the numbers in a calm voice. Approximately 2.3 million enemy contacts. Captain. The Hive Mother is positioned in the center of the formation. Coalition forces are down to 34 operational vessels. Lieutenant Cristina Reyes had already plotted multiple attack vectors. I have 17 possible approach routes to the Hive Mother. None of them are what I would call safe. Captain Harris almost smiled. Safe was never part of the plan. He turned to Weapons Officer Scott Palmer. Power up all weapons systems. We are going hunting. The Sentinel moved. It did not fly like a normal ship. It seemed to phase in and out of existence, appearing in one place and then another without crossing the space in between. The Vraxan tried to track it, but their weapons found only empty void where the human vessel had been moments before. Then the Sentinel opened fire. Antimatter beams lanced out from its forward batteries, each one carrying enough energy to crack a planet. Vraxan ships did not explode when hit. They simply ceased to exist, erased from reality as if they had never been. Graviton pulses crushed formations of fighters into points of infinite density. Plasma lances carved burning wounds through the swarm, leaving trails of molten debris in their wake. In the first 60 seconds, the Sentinel destroyed more Vraxan than the entire Coalition fleet had managed in 6 months of fighting. Admiral Xyloth stared at his tactical display in disbelief. His translator was struggling to process what he was seeing. A single ship was cutting through the Vraxan swarm like a blade through water. Every weapon it fired killed dozens of enemies. Every movement it made left destruction in its wake. Commander Valara felt tears running down her face. They came, she whispered. The humans actually came. The Vraxan swarm recoiled in confusion. They had never encountered anything like this. Their weapons could not hit the human vessel. Their numbers seemed to mean nothing. For the first time in their long history of conquest, they were afraid. But the Hive Mother was not afraid. It was angry. It screamed orders through quantum-entangled neurons, commanding its children to overwhelm this insolent creature that dared to challenge them. Millions of Vraxan vessels converged on the Sentinel, sacrificing themselves in waves to bring down the impossible ship. The Sentinel's shields flared under the onslaught. Warning lights flickered across consoles. Chief Engineer Nathan Cole shouted updates from the engine room, rerouting power through systems that were never meant to handle such stress. Shield integrity at 67%, Ensign Laura Mitchell reported. They are adapting to our weapon frequencies. Katie Morrison coordinated damage control teams with cold efficiency. Minor hull breaches on decks 7 and 12. Repair crews en route. Captain Harris watched the Vraxan close in around them. The swarm was sacrificing thousands of ships to land single hits on the Sentinel. It was not a sustainable strategy for them, but it was not sustainable for the humans either. He made a decision. Nathan, he said over the internal.com, how long to charge the Genesis Lance? There was a pause. When the chief engineer answered, his voice was hushed with something between awe and fear. Captain, that weapon has never been tested in combat. The theoretical yield is beyond anything we have ever deployed. How long, Chief? 7 minutes. But sir, firing it will drain all our power reserves. We will be dead in space for at least 3 minutes afterward. If there are any Vraxan left, they will tear us apart. Captain Harris nodded slowly. He looked at the Hive Mother on the tactical display. It was the key. Everything depended on what happened next. Then we had better make sure there are no Vraxan left. The Vraxan had consumed 1,000 civilizations across a dozen galaxies. They had devoured species that had mastered technology beyond imagination. They had crushed empires that had lasted for millions of years. They were the ultimate predators, the final darkness at the end of all things. And now, for the first time in their existence, they knew fear. The hive mother felt it spreading through the swarm like a disease. Her children were dying faster than she could replace them. The strange black ship moved through her forces like a ghost, appearing and disappearing at will, leaving only death behind. Nothing in her vast experience had prepared her for this, but she was not beaten yet. She had fought and won against species that had seemed invincible. She had adapted and overcome challenges that would have destroyed lesser beings. She would do so again. She screamed new orders through the quantum web that connected her to every Vraxan in existence. Forget fear. Forget survival. There is only the swarm. There is only hunger. Destroy the enemy at any cost. 100,000 Vraxan vessels broke away from the main fleet and converged on the Sentinel. They did not attack in waves this time. They came all at once, a solid wall of organic metal and hatred that blotted out the stars themselves. On the bridge, alarms screamed warnings that no one needed to hear. The view screen showed nothing but enemy ships closing in from every direction. There was no escape. There was no retreat. There was only the battle. Shield integrity dropping. Ensign Laura Mitchell reported, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. 42%. 39%. 35%. Lieutenant Ryan Peters fired every weapon the ship had. Antimatter beams, graviton pulses, plasma lances, point defense cannons. The Sentinel was a fortress of destruction, killing Vraxan by the thousands. But for every one that died, 10 more took its place. Hull breach on Deck 9, Katie Morrison called out. Sealing emergency bulkheads. Casualty reports coming in from multiple sections. Captain Harris gripped the arms of his command chair and refused to look away from the screen. How long until the Genesis Lance is ready? 4 minutes, Chief Engineer Nathan Cole replied from the engine room. His voice was strained. He and his team were performing miracles down there, keeping systems running that should have failed long ago. Just give me 4 more minutes, Captain. The Sentinel shuddered as a Vraxan warship crashed directly into its shields. The creature exploded on impact, spraying organic acid across the energy barrier. The shields flickered and died for a split second before backup generators kicked in. Ensign Mitchell checked her displays with shaking hands. Shields, at 28%. Captain, we are not going to last 4 minutes at this rate. Harris turned to Lieutenant Christina Reyes at navigation. Get us closer to the hive mother. We need to be in optimal firing range when the Lance is ready. Closer? Reyes stared at him. Captain, the swarm is thickest around the hive mother. We will be torn apart before we get halfway there. Harris met her eyes. That is an order, Lieutenant. Reyes hesitated for only a moment. Then she nodded and turned back to her console. Yes, Captain. The Sentinel surged forward, pushing through the swarm like a swimmer against a current of razor blades. Vraxan ships slammed into them from every angle. Weapons fire tore at their hull. The screech of metal giving way echoed through the corridors. In the engine room, Nathan Cole watched his beloved systems fail one by one. Power conduits overloaded and exploded. Cooling systems broke down, sending temperatures soaring. Crew members collapsed from exhaustion at their posts, but refused to stop working. 2 minutes, Cole shouted into the comm. Genesis Lance at 80% charge. The hive mother sensed the human ship approaching and understood its intention. This vessel was coming for her. It had a weapon capable of threatening her existence. She could not allow it to get close enough to fire. She unleashed her most devastating attack. Continent-sized tentacles of organic matter lashed out from her body, each one capable of crushing a battleship with ease. They were faster than they had any right to be, guided by 1 billion years of predatory instinct. The first tentacle slammed into the Sentinel's port side. The ship spun wildly, throwing crew members against walls and consoles. Bones broke, blood flowed. But the humans did not stop fighting. Weapons Officer Scott Palmer kept firing even as his console sparked and smoked around him. He had third-degree burns on his hands, but he refused to leave his post. Every shot mattered. Every kill brought them closer to victory. Another tentacle struck the ship. Then another. The Sentinel was being battered from all sides, its black hull now scarred and torn. "Hull integrity critical," Mitchell reported. "We have breaches on 12 decks. Life support failing in sections 4 through 7. Captain Harris looked at the tactical display. They were almost in range, almost close enough to end this nightmare forever. He had to buy just a little more time. "All hands," he said over the intercom. "This is the captain. What happens in the next 60 seconds will determine the fate of the galaxy. I know you are tired. I know you are hurt. I know many of you are afraid. But we did not come this far to fail. Hold the line, just a little longer." The response came not in words, but in actions. Damage control teams worked faster. Weapons crews loaded ammunition with bleeding fingers. Engineers patched systems that had been destroyed moments before. The Sentinel was a dying ship crewed by wounded sailors, and none of them intended to stop fighting until the job was done. Nathan Cole's voice cut through the chaos. "Genesis Lance, fully charged and ready to fire, Captain." Harris looked at the view screen. The Hive Mother filled it completely. A mountain of flesh and evil just waiting to be destroyed. They had made it. Against all odds, they had made it. "Lieutenant Reyes," he said quietly. "All stop." The Sentinel halted, hanging in space before the creature that had ended countless worlds. "Weapons, Officer Palmer," Harris continued. "Target the Hive Mother's central mass." Palmer's burned fingers flew across his console. "Target locked, Captain." Harris took a deep breath. He thought of Earth. He thought of all the species that had died. He thought of the future that was about to begin. Fire. The Genesis Lance was not a weapon in any traditional sense. It did not fire a beam or launch a projectile. It did something far more terrifying. It tore a hole in reality itself. The bow of the Sentinel split open, revealing a device that bent light around itself like a black hole. Energy readings spiked beyond anything the ship's sensors could measure. Space began to warp and twist around the weapon's barrel as fundamental forces of the universe were bent to human will. Then it fired. A line of absolute darkness stretched from the Sentinel to the Hive Mother. It was not light. It was not energy. It was the absence of everything. A controlled tear in the fabric of existence that erased whatever it touched from the universe completely. The Vraxan ships in its path did not explode or disintegrate. They simply stopped existing, as if they had never been born. The beam struck the Hive Mother at the exact center of her mass. For one eternal moment, the creature seemed to freeze in space. A billion eyes widened in something that might have been surprise or fear, or both. Then she was gone. The Hive Mother did not die. Death implies a body left behind. A transition from one state to another. She was erased, removed from reality as completely as if she had never existed. One moment there was a moon-sized monster that had consumed entire civilizations. The next moment there was only empty space. The effect on the Vraxan swarm was immediate and absolute. The Hive Mother was not just their leader. She was their brain, their guiding intelligence, the mind that coordinated their every action. Without her, they were nothing but mindless organic machines, with no purpose and no direction. Vraxan ships began crashing into each other. Fighters spun out of control and slammed into larger vessels. Warships drifted aimlessly, their weapons falling silent, their engines dying. The swarm that had terrorized the galaxy for years collapsed in a matter of seconds, destroying itself through sheer lack of coordination. The battle was over. On the bridge of the Sentinel, the lights flickered and died. Emergency power kicked in, bathing everything in a dim red glow. Every console was dark. Every system was offline. The Genesis Lance had drained every reserve of power the ship possessed. Captain Daniel Harris sat in his command chair and listened to the silence. For the first time in what felt like hours, nothing was shooting at them. Nothing was trying to kill them. They were alive. Katie Morrison was the first to speak. "Casualties are still being counted, Captain. We have lost at least 40 crew members. Another 100 are wounded. But we are still here." Harris nodded slowly. The numbers hurt. Every death was a person he had known. a life he had been responsible for. He would mourn them properly when there was time. For now, there was still work to do. Chief Engineer Nathan Cole's voice came through the emergency comm system. Power restoration in progress. Captain. Main systems should be back online in about 3 minutes. The Genesis lance worked exactly as designed, maybe a little too well. Despite everything, Harris almost smiled. Good work, Chief. You kept us alive down there. Outside the ship, the remaining Coalition vessels approached cautiously. They had watched the entire battle from a distance. Too damaged, and too few to offer any real help. Now they stared at the human vessel with something approaching religious awe. Admiral Xyloth had seen many things in his 200 years of service. He had witnessed the birth of stars and the death of worlds. He had met species that communicated through pure thought, and others that existed outside of normal time. But he had never seen anything like what he had just witnessed. A single ship had done what the combined might of the Coalition could not. A single ship had faced the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known and won. Commander Valara was weeping openly at her console. She did not care who saw. They came, she kept saying. They actually came. The Coalition ships gathered around the Sentinel in a protective formation. Medical vessels docked to transfer wounded. Engineering teams offered assistance with repairs. After centuries of isolation and decades of mutual distrust, two species were reaching out to each other in the aftermath of shared survival. Captain Harris stood on his bridge and watched the Coalition vessels approach. His uniform was torn and stained with blood that was mostly his own. His face was covered in soot, and his hands were shaking from exhaustion and adrenaline. But his eyes were clear, and his voice was steady when he accepted the incoming transmission. Admiral Xyloth's face appeared on the view screen. He was silent for a long moment, struggling to find words that could express what he was feeling. Finally, he spoke. Captain, on behalf of the Galactic Coalition, I offer our deepest gratitude. You have saved not just our lives but the lives of billions throughout the galaxy. We know that we have no right to ask for your help after what we did to your people. And yet you came anyway. There are no words. Harris considered his response carefully. He thought about the history between their species. He thought about the betrayal and the anger and the long years of isolation. He thought about the dead crew members who would never see Earth again, and the wounded who would carry scars for the rest of their lives. But he also thought about the future, about what could be built if old grudges were finally laid to rest. Admiral, he said slowly, the past cannot be undone. But the future is not yet written. Earth has spent 200 years hiding behind the veil, nursing old wounds and preparing for a war we hoped would never come. That time is over. We are ready to rejoin the galaxy, not as victims or as conquerors, but as partners. He paused and looked around at his crew. At Katie Morrison, battered but unbroken. At Lieutenant Reyes, who had flown them through hell and back. At Ensign Mitchell and Officer Palmer, and all the others who had stood firm when everything was falling apart. The Sentinel will require repairs, he continued. We have wounded who need medical attention, and dead who deserve proper honors. After that, we should probably talk about what comes next. Admiral Xyloth bowed his head in a gesture of respect. Whatever you need, Captain. Whatever we can provide. You have earned it 1,000 times over. Harris nodded and leaned back in his chair. The view screen showed the stars of a galaxy that had nearly died and was now struggling to be reborn. It would take years to rebuild. It would take generations to heal all the wounds. But for the first time in a very long time, there was hope. Lieutenant Reyes, he said quietly, when repairs are complete, set a course for Earth. It is time to go home. And as the Sentinel's systems slowly came back to life, humanity's first representative to the new galaxy looked out at the stars and smiled. The long isolation was over. A new dawn had begun.
Ambassador Dr. Sarah Chen stood at the viewport of the UESV Olive Branch and watched the massive station grow larger. Nexus Prime hung in space like a jewel, home to the Galactic Council. 47 alien species lived and worked there, ruling thousands of star systems. She had trained 5 years for this moment. Earth's future depended on what happened in the next few days. Ambassador, we're cleared for docking, Captain Torres said behind her. They're sending an escort, Sarah nodded. Her team of 12 diplomats, scientists, and security personnel gathered their materials. They wore formal Earth uniforms, dark blue with silver trim. She wanted the Council to see humans as professional and peaceful. Earth had discovered faster-than-light travel only 3 years ago. Since then, they had met dozens of alien species. All of them answered to the Council. The Council chamber was enormous. Sarah's team looked tiny walking across the polished floor. Seats rose in circles above them, filled with alien beings of every shape and size. Some had scales, others had fur. Some breathed different gases and sat in special containers. All of them watched the humans with various expressions that Sarah couldn't fully read. At the highest point sat the Vrax Imperator, a massive creature covered in black armor-like skin. His 4 eyes gleamed as he looked down at Sarah. Beside him floated the Hive Mind Collective, thousands of small insect-like beings that moved as one, speaking with a unified voice. Humans of Earth, the Imperator's voice boomed. You have been summoned to hear the Council's judgment on your species. Sarah felt her spine straighten. With respect, Imperator, we came to negotiate Earth's entry as an independent member of the galactic community. Laughter rippled through the chamber. Not friendly laughter. The Hive Mind's voice buzzed. Independence? You discovered star travel 3 of your years ago. We have maintained galactic order for 20,000 years. You are children. Sarah had prepared for this. Children who mastered quantum entanglement communication, artificial intelligence, and genetic enhancement. We're different from the species you're used to, but we're not primitive. The Imperator leaned forward. You are exactly like every other species that comes before us, full of pride and ignorance. You will accept client race status. You will follow our laws. You will limit your expansion to 3 star systems. You will provide resources and troops when the Council demands. These terms are not negotiable. Then we respectfully decline, Sarah said clearly. Earth will not become a client race. We seek partnership, not subjugation. The chamber erupted in angry sounds. The Imperator slammed a massive appendage on his platform. You dare refuse the Council? The Council that has brought peace to this entire sector? Sarah activated her tablet. I've reviewed the historical records you provided. In the last 1,000 years, 23 species reached space travel capability in this sector. Only 19 exist today. I'd like to know what happened to the other 4. Silence fell across the chamber. The hive mind's buzzing took on a sharp edge. They were incompatible with galactic civilization. Incompatible? Sarah pressed. Or did they refuse to submit and you erased them? The Imperator rose to his full height, towering even in the holographic display. You overstep, human. The Council does what is necessary to maintain order. Species that threaten stability are dealt with. That is our burden and our duty. Sarah felt cold understanding wash over her. You're admitting to genocide. We prefer the term pruning, the hive mind said. A garden must be tended. Dangerous growths must be removed before they choke out everything else. Sarah's security chief, Commander Liu, whispered urgently in her ear. Ambassador, we need to leave now. But Sarah had one more question. And what makes a species dangerous in your eyes? The Imperator smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. Warriors, conquerors. Species with military capability that exceeds their wisdom. Species like yours, human. Your history is written in blood. Your planet has known 200 major wars in the last century alone. You created weapons that could destroy your entire world. You are exactly the kind of growth that must be pruned. Sarah's fingers moved quickly on her tablet, starting an encrypted transmission back to Earth. You're making a mistake. No. Ambassador Chen, you made the mistake when you refused our generous offer. The Imperator gestured and doors sealed around the chamber. Armed guards, massive creatures with energy weapons, surrounded Sarah's team. You are charged with espionage, refusing lawful council authority, and crimes against galactic order. You and your entire team are sentenced to execution. The sentence will be carried out immediately and broadcast to all council worlds, including Earth. You're going to execute diplomats? Sarah couldn't believe what she was hearing. We came in peace. And you will die as an example, the hive mind buzzed. So that Earth understands its place. Submit or be erased. These are the only choices. Sarah's transmission completed. A tiny light on her tablet blinked green. Everything she had recorded, every admission, every threat, was now traveling to Earth at faster-than-light speeds. She looked at her team. Commander Liu stood ready to fight, but Sarah shook her head. 12 people couldn't fight an entire station. Stand down, she ordered quietly. Then louder, to the council. You're making the biggest mistake in your 20,000-year history. They were taken to a public square on Nexus Prime. Millions of aliens watched in person or through broadcasts. Sarah and her team stood on a platform, hands bound. The Imperator read their crimes to the assembled masses. Sarah barely heard it. She was thinking about Earth, about her daughter, about humanity. The executioner approached with an energy blade. Sarah looked directly into the closest camera. To anyone watching on Earth, she said clearly, don't mourn us. They think executing us will make you afraid. They don't understand. They killed one, but they've made an enemy of all. They think we're dangerous now. They're coming. The blade flashed. The transmission cut out. Across the galaxy on a small blue planet, billions of humans watched their ambassador die. They watched the council laugh. They watched the other alien species cheer or sit in silent approval. They watched and they remembered. In a bunker deep beneath Geneva, Fleet Admiral Marcus Kane watched the execution with cold eyes. He had known Sarah Chen for 15 years. She was one of the finest people he'd ever met. Now she was gone, murdered for the crime of standing up for her species. Kane reached for the red phone on his desk. Around the world, similar calls were being made. Earth's governments were convening. The military was mobilizing. In secret facilities hidden in the Oort cloud, lights began turning on in massive shipyards that had been running dark for decades. The council had made their choice. Now Earth would make theirs. Admiral Kane looked at the frozen image on his screen, Sarah Chen's defiant face in her last moment. He whispered to the empty room, "They're coming, Sarah, I promise you. They're all coming." The message reached Earth 6 hours after the execution. It came through quantum entanglement channels, impossible to intercept or block. Sarah Chen's final transmission contained everything. Recordings of the Council admitting to genocide, evidence of 23 extinct civilizations, and the full video of what happened to Earth's diplomatic team. Admiral Marcus Kane stood in the Emergency Command Center beneath Geneva. Around him, holographic displays showed leaders from every major nation on Earth. The Secretary General of the United Earth Government, President Jennifer Walsh, looked like she had aged 10 years in the last hour. "Play it again," said Premier Lee of the Asian Coalition. His voice was steady, but his hands shook. Kane didn't want to watch it again, but he understood. The world needed to see. He nodded to his communications officer. The video played on every screen. Sarah Chen standing tall, her final words. The blade falling. The council's laughter. President Walsh spoke first. "Fleet Admiral Kane, you said we had options. Tell us." Kane had been preparing for this conversation his entire career. He pulled up classified files, 30 years of secret development programs. Since the Cold War ended, every nation has wondered what would happen if we met hostile aliens. We prepared. We built things. We hid things. Now it's time to use them. The holographic displays changed, showing massive structures floating in the darkness beyond Pluto. Ships. Hundreds of them. They looked nothing like the Olive Branch, which had been designed to look peaceful and friendly. These ships looked like what they were, weapons. The Ghost Fleet, Kane said quietly. 500 capital ships, 2,000 support vessels, 3,000 autonomous attack drones. Built in secret over 3 decades using resources from asteroid mining, powered by fusion reactors that can run for 50 years without refueling, armed with weapons the Council banned 10,000 years ago. Chancellor Schmidt of the European Federation leaned forward. Banned weapons? Kinetic kill vehicles, relativistic missiles, quantum torpedoes, AI-guided warfare, chemical and biological agents, nuclear weapons in massive quantities. The Council banned them because they're too effective, too destructive. They prefer energy weapons and projectiles that follow their rules of war. Kane's expression hardened. "We don't follow their rules." The room fell silent. President Okonkwo of the African Union spoke carefully. "You're talking about total war." "I'm talking about survival," Kane corrected. "Sarah's transmission included intelligence we couldn't have gotten any other way. The Council sees us as a threat because we are a threat. We're warriors. Our entire history is warfare. We've developed technology at a pace that terrifies them. If we submit now, they'll control us for a few generations. Then they'll erase us. If we run, they'll hunt us. The only option is to hit them so hard they never forget what happens when you touch Earth. How many casualties are we talking about? Asked Prime Minister Tanaka of the Pacific Alliance. Kane pulled up tactical projections. If we strike first using maximum surprise and overwhelming force, we can cripple their military capability in the first wave. Target their shipyards, command centers, and military installations. Avoid civilian populations. The Council has 47 member species, but most are client races who were forced to join. Intelligence suggests many would rebel if we break the Council's power. Secretary General Walsh looked at each leader's hologram. This is the decision that defines humanity's future. Vote now. Do we submit to the Council or do we go to war? One by one, the votes came in. Kane watched the tally climb. It was the first time in human history that every major government agreed on anything. The final vote was unanimous. Walsh turned back to Kane. Fleet Admiral, you have authorization to deploy the Ghost Fleet. Rules of engagement? Kane had already prepared the orders. Protocol reckoning. First strike targeting military and government facilities only. Total dismantlement of the Council's ability to make war. Capture of Council leadership for trial. We're not genocidal like them. We're showing the galaxy there's a difference between justice and murder. When do we launch? Premier Lee asked. The fleet has been on standby for 6 hours, fueled and ready. Crews have been training for this scenario for years. We can launch in 3 hours, Kane paused. I'm going with them. This is personal now. Walsh nodded slowly. Do you think we can win? The Council has ruled for 20,000 years, Kane said. They're comfortable, fat on their power. They think warfare is about honor and following rules. They execute diplomats as public theater. They don't understand what humanity is capable of when you back us into a corner. He looked directly at the Secretary General. Yes, we'll win. The question is what we do after. First, we make sure there is an after, Walsh said. She stood and every leader followed. Admiral Kane, you are authorized to engage. Show them what happens when you kill our people. Kane saluted. The connection ended. He turned to his staff. All hands, this is Fleet Admiral Kane. Execute launch sequence. Notify all Ghost Fleet commanders we're going to war. 2 hours later, Kane stood on the bridge of the UESV Retribution, the flagship of the Ghost Fleet. It was the largest warship humanity had ever built. 1 kilometer long, bristling with weapons. Around it, 500 other ships powered up their drives. The crews were the best Earth had. Veterans, volunteers, people who wanted to look the Council in the eye and ask why. All ships report ready, Admiral, his XO said. Kane sat in the command chair. Behind him stood a photo of Sarah Chen, placed there as a reminder of why they were doing this. Helm, set course for Nexus Prime, maximum speed. Communications, send a message to the Council on all frequencies. Message ready, sir. Kane thought about what to say. He thought about Sarah, about the 12 people who died with her, about the 23 civilizations the Council had erased, about his grandchildren who deserved to grow up free. Message as follows, Kane said. To the Galactic Council, you executed our ambassador. You threatened our world. You laughed while you murdered peace itself. You called us dangerous, and you were right. We are dangerous, but we're not like you. We don't murder diplomats. We don't commit genocide. We don't rule through fear. We're coming for you, not to conquer, but to dismantle. We're going to take apart your military, your government, and your power piece by piece. And when we're done, every species in the galaxy will know what happens when you execute peace. You killed one. We're coming for all. Signed, Fleet Admiral Marcus Kane, United Earth Space Force. Message sent, Admiral. All ships, jump on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark. 500 warships vanished from Earth's space, leaving only the faint radiation signature of their jump drives. They reappeared at the edge of Council space, moving faster than anything the Council had ever seen. The Ghost Fleet was sailing to war, and the galaxy would never be the same. On Earth, Secretary General Walsh addressed the planet. People of Earth. Today, the Galactic Council executed our ambassador and her team for the crime of standing up for humanity. Today we go to war, not for conquest, not for revenge, but to ensure that no one ever makes the mistake of thinking humans are weak. Stand together, be strong, and trust that our people will return victorious. Across Earth, billions of people watched the Ghost Fleet disappear into the stars. Some prayed, some cried, some sharpened their resolve. All of them waited, united as never before, to see what humanity could do when pushed too far. The Council was about to find out. The Ghost Fleet traveled through the void between stars, silent and deadly. Admiral Kane stood on the bridge of the Retribution, watching the tactical display. 500 capital ships moved in perfect formation, a wall of humanity's finest engineering. They had been in jump space for 3 days, crossing distances that should have taken months in normal space. "Admiral, we're approaching the Council border," his XO, Commander Park, reported. "Sensors detect patrol vessels ahead." Kane studied the display. 6 Council patrol ships, old models designed more for customs checks than combat. They probably hadn't seen real action in centuries. "How long until they detect us?" 30 seconds at our current speed. They're already broadcasting challenge codes. Kane considered his options. The smart move was to avoid contact, slip past unnoticed. But that wasn't the message he wanted to send. "Maintain course. Weapons free. Target their engines and communication systems. I want at least one ship intact enough to send a message." "Aye, sir." Weapons locked. The patrol ships finally saw them. Their broadcast changed from routine challenges to panicked warnings. They tried to scatter, but they were too slow. The Retribution's AI targeting systems tracked all 6 vessels simultaneously. Railgun rounds, accelerated to a fraction of light speed, crossed the distance in milliseconds. 5 ships exploded as kinetic rounds tore through their hulls. The 6th ship lost its engines and communications array but remained mostly intact. The entire engagement lasted 4.7 seconds. "Cease fire," Kane ordered. "Scan for survivors. Multiple life signs on the surviving vessel, Admiral. They're venting atmosphere from 3 compartments, but the ship isn't critical." "Good. Broadcast this message to them. Tell the Council that Earth is coming. Tell them to prepare." Kane turned to his navigation officer. "Plot a course directly through Council space. No more avoiding patrols. I want them to see us coming." Commander Park looked concerned. "Sir, that will give them time to prepare defenses." "That's the point," Kane said. "Sarah died trying to make peace. We're going to make war, and we're going to do it in broad daylight. No sneak attacks, no ambushes. We're going to walk through their front door and dare them to stop us." The Ghost Fleet jumped again, appearing deep inside Council territory. Alarms screamed across a dozen worlds. The Council Emergency Defense Network activated for the first time in 3,000 years. Ships scrambled from orbital stations. Planetary shields powered up. The Council military, spread across hundreds of systems, began mobilizing. In the Council chamber on Nexus Prime, chaos reigned. The Vrax Imperator bellowed orders while the hive mind coordinated fleet movements. A massive holographic display showed the Ghost Fleet's position and trajectory. How did they build 500 capital ships in 3 years? A delegate from the Tarvac species demanded. "It's impossible." "They didn't build them in 3 years, a military analyst explained. "Energy signatures suggest these ships are decades old. They've been hiding them, planning this." The Imperator slammed his appendage down. "It doesn't matter when they built them. What matters is stopping them. How many ships can we mass against them?" 1,500 capital ships within a week, Imperator. 3,000 if we pull defenders from outer territories. Do it. Mass everything at the Vrax system. We'll crush them there on my homeworld. Let humanity see what happens when they challenge true power. But Admiral Kane had no intention of going where the Council wanted. "Navigation, adjust course. New target, the Hivemind home cluster. They're coordinating the Council's response." Cut off the head. The Ghost Fleet changed direction, jumping past the massive Council force gathering at Vrax. For 3 days, they played a deadly game of cat and mouse, appearing in one system and jumping away before the Council fleet could respond. Each time they appeared, they destroyed military installations, shipyards, and supply depots. Each time, they broadcast the same message. "This is for Sarah Chen." Commander Park studied the tactical reports. "Admiral, we've destroyed 63 military facilities without a single casualty on our side. Their response time is terrible. They're not used to fighting," Kane explained. "Look at their tactics. They mass their ships in big formations, broadcast challenges, wait for responses. They've turned warfare into a ritual. They forgot it's supposed to be about winning. And we're not playing by their rules." "Exactly. We studied every war humanity ever fought. We learned from our mistakes. We built AI that can coordinate attacks across multiple light years simultaneously. We use weapons they banned because they're too effective. They spent 20,000 years making war civilized. We're showing them what uncivilized war looks like. The Ghost Fleet appeared at the edge of the hive mind's home cluster, a system of 12 planets connected by massive organic structures. The hive mind itself was distributed across all 12 worlds, billions of individual organisms thinking as one. It was the Council's strategist, their military genius. Incoming transmission from the hive mind, the communications officer reported. Put it through. The hive mind's voice filled the bridge, thousands of voices speaking in perfect unity. Admiral Kane, we offer terms. Cease your aggression. We will grant Earth independent status, full membership rights, reparations for Ambassador Chen's death. Kane almost laughed. You killed her 4 days ago. Now you want to negotiate? We underestimated humanity. We acknowledge our error. There is no need for further bloodshed. You're right about one thing. You did underestimate us. Kane gestured to his weapons officer. But there's every need for further bloodshed. You murdered diplomats. You committed genocide. You threatened Earth. Terms are for equals. You're not our equals anymore. Then you leave us no choice but to defend ourselves. Finally, Kane said, an honest response. The hive mind cluster's defenses activated. Thousands of defense platforms, hundreds of ships, energy shields that could withstand star-level bombardment. It was the most heavily defended location in Council space. Kane studied the defenses with a predator's eye. Here's the thing about AI warfare, he said to his crew. You don't need to be stronger than the enemy. You need to be smarter. Communications. Release the swarm. From the Ghost Fleet's carriers, 3,000 autonomous attack drones launched. Each one was smaller than a fighter, guided by quantum-entangled AI that could make decisions faster than any organic mind. They scattered in seemingly random patterns. The hive mind's defenses tracked them, energy weapons firing. Hundreds of drones died, but for every drone destroyed, 10 more slipped through. They found weak points, gaps in the shields, moments when platforms reloaded. They shared information instantly, learning and adapting. Swarm is at 60% penetration, Park reported. Loss is acceptable. Kane watched the tactical display like a chess master watching his pieces move. All ships prepare kinetic bombardment. Target coordinates uploading now. Fire when the swarm breaches. The drones reached critical facilities, power generators, shield emitters, command centers. They detonated simultaneously. For 3 seconds, gaps appeared in the hive mind's defenses. Fire, Kane said quietly. The Ghost Fleet fired as one. Not energy weapons that the shields could absorb. Kinetic rounds. Chunks of metal accelerated to relativistic speeds, carrying the energy of small nuclear bombs in simple mass and velocity. They punched through the weakened shields like paper. 12 planets shook as military installations vaporized. The organic structures connecting them burned. The hive mind's voice on the channel became chaotic, multiple voices speaking at once, unity breaking down. Cease fire, Kane ordered. That's enough. The bombardment stopped. The hive mind's home cluster still existed, but its military capability was gone. More importantly, something else was gone too. Kane could hear it in the chaotic transmissions. The hive mind's perfect unity was broken. Fear had entered its collective consciousness. Broadcast to all Council worlds, Kane said. This is Admiral Kane of Earth. The hive mind's defenses have fallen. Your greatest strategist couldn't stop us. We're coming to Nexus Prime next. To the Vrax Imperator and all Council leadership, prepare to answer for your crimes. He cut the transmission and turned to his crew. Plot course for Vrax. The Imperator wants to make his stand on his homeworld. Let's give him what he wants. As the Ghost Fleet jumped away, the Council finally understood what they faced. This wasn't a war of conquest or territory. This was extermination of everything the Council represented. And humanity was very, very good at war. On Nexus Prime, the Imperator watched the reports in growing horror. The human fleet was unstoppable, not because they were stronger, but because they fought like nothing the Council had ever seen. Unpredictable, ruthless, efficient. For the first time in his 300-year life, the Vrax Imperator felt fear. The Vrax homeworld burned, not with fire or nuclear weapons. Admiral Kane had been specific in his orders. No civilian casualties, no collateral damage. But every military installation, every government facility, every symbol of Council power on Vrax was being systematically erased from existence. The Ghost Fleet hung in orbit like a sword over the planet. Precision strikes demolished the Imperator's palace complex. The military academy that had trained generals for 5,000 years, the orbital shipyards that had built council warships for longer than human civilization had existed. 12 minutes after the first shot, the planet's defensive capability was 0. Ground forces are surrendering across the planet, Commander Park reported. Vrak's military command is requesting terms. Tell them to lay down weapons and await further instructions, Kane said. Where's the Imperator? Bunker complex beneath the palace. Heavily shielded. He's still alive, Kane nodded. Deploy assault teams. I want him alive. While Earth's special forces penetrated the bunker, Kane turned his attention to the broader situation. The tactical display showed council forces scattered across 100 systems trying to regroup. But they were too late. The Ghost Fleet had already broken the council's spine. Admiral, we're receiving surrender requests from 15 council species, the communications officer said. They're claiming they were forced into council membership. Kane wasn't surprised. Sarah's intelligence had predicted this. Accept surrenders from any species that can prove they were client races. Put them in contact with our diplomatic corps. The ones who joined willingly can wait. Sir, the Tarvax Confederacy is asking for negotiations. They want to switch sides. Tell them we're not taking sides. We're taking down the council. After that, every species can govern themselves. An alert chimed. Admiral, assault team has breached the bunker. The Imperator is in custody. Bring him to the retribution. I want to look him in the eye. 20 minutes later, the Vrak's Imperator was escorted onto the bridge in restraints. He was massive, easily 3 meters tall, but he looked smaller somehow, diminished. His 4 eyes darted around, seeing the human crew working efficiently, seeing the tactical display showing his homeworld occupied. Kane stood from his command chair and walked over. He had to look up to meet the Imperator's gaze. Do you know why you lost? The Imperator's voice was hoarse. You had superior numbers. Better weapons. You cheated. No, Kane said quietly. We lost people we loved and we didn't forget. You killed Sarah Chen and thought it would make us afraid. You don't understand humans very well. What do you want? Tribute? Territory? We can negotiate. We want you to stand trial for genocide. Kane interrupted. You admitted to erasing 23 civilizations. That's not something you negotiate away. I am the Imperator. You're a war criminal, Kane said flatly. Take him to the brig. Standard detention protocols. As guards led the Imperator away, Park approached with new reports. Sir, we're getting interesting intelligence from captured council databases. Dozens of species have been waiting for someone to challenge council authority. Some are already in open rebellion. Kane studied the data. Across council space, client races were rising up. Some attacked their council overseers. Others simply declared independence. The council's 20,000-year grip on power was dissolving in days. What's the status of the council military? Fragmenting. Some species are pulling their ships back to defend homeworlds. Others are trying to mass for a counterattack. The hive mind's coordination network is still broken, so they're not working together effectively. Good. That makes our job easier. Communications. Broadcast to all remaining council military forces. Channel open, sir. Kane's words were transmitted across the galaxy. This is Fleet Admiral Kane of Earth. The Vrak's Imperator is in custody. The hive mind's military capability is destroyed. 60% of council military infrastructure has been eliminated. To all council forces still fighting, you're not fighting for peace or order. You're fighting for leaders who commit genocide when species won't submit. Stand down. Let this end. Some took the offer. Others didn't. For the next week, the Ghost Fleet methodically dismantled what remained of council military power. They didn't seek out battles, but they didn't avoid them either. When council forces engaged, they were destroyed with clinical efficiency. The battle for the Nexus Prime system was the last major engagement. 300 council warships from a dozen species made their stand around the station that had been the council's heart for thousands of years. They had the numbers, the position, and the desperation of those with nothing left to lose. Kane surveyed the enemy formation. They're fighting smart this time. Good defensive positioning, overlapping fields of fire. They learned from watching us. We could bypass them, Park suggested. Hit other targets. No, this ends here. They want a final battle. We'll give them one. Kane opened a channel to the enemy fleet. Council forces, this is your last chance to surrender. We don't want to kill you.